Welcome, welcome, welcome to our viewers and listeners to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and our other co-host is Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe Hamlett?
Dr. Dave Peltz, I am doing absolutely fabulous. I'm doing great. Very
That
good.
is awesome to hear. Um, uh, and with that greatness and feeling of jubilance, um, our topic for this week is direction. Such
Okay.
as what is your direction? Do you know your direction? That sort of thing. What are you doing about your direction? So, Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on the topic of direction?
That is a very good topic. Direction. I mean, it has everything you just said. Where are you going? What are you doing? And before we got on the air, one of the things we mentioned or you mentioned as we talked about this topic was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that actually lends to the direction you take to
Mhm.
get to that destination, as we've talked and spoke on in many previous episodes. If you're not heading in some direction, you are either stagnant, you are not going to probably move forward, or it's less likely that you will. So not picking a direction, sometimes it might be picked for you, and you might not
Right.
like the results. So
Nothing like
that
being
is a
voluntold.
exactly. We both know what that's like. So if you fail to pick a direction, if you fail or just bypass that decision making process for yourself, someone will likely pick that up for you. And
Mhm.
again, it may be a direction that you don't want to go. So when we think of direction, I think Dave alluded to it at the very beginning. So and it doesn't, if you choose a direction, even if you're going left, right, as long as you choose that direction, that's great. But again, we would just like for you not to just stay stagnant or not pick a direction, because again, it can be chosen for you. And in a lot of cases, you may not like that direction. So when we think of direction, it can be, something you choose, which is what we would like for you to do or which we would recommend. But then the other side of that is that it'll be chosen for you. So when you
Mhm.
think of direction, again, are you have something in mind where you want to go? And it goes back to many topics we've talked about in the past: goal setting, destination. Where are you trying to go? And if you kind of know where that where you're headed or where you want to go, then that'll help you with your direction. Like I say, you could end up going left and right, but that may be based on what scenario you run into.
Mhm.
You could have a perfect direction picked out, and just like on a long journey, sometimes you have to take a detour. Sometimes you have to go around barricades or, go through an area that you may not have wanted to. But as long as you still have that intended direction in sight, it still could be okay.
Yeah.
So I know I kind of bounced back and forth on a few things just to get us started, but like I say, direction could mean so many different things.
Yeah, and Dr. Joe, you mentioned a couple of things, and one I'm really going to pull on for a few moments, and that was knowing where you want to go.
Yep.
And I work with, I have the opportunity on occasion to work with transitioning military veterans and other clients. And one of the biggest things that we encounter is that lack of knowing what your direction is. And to your point, if you don't know or don't decide, there's a pretty good chance someone's going to do it for you.
Yep.
Where I was going with that was, and this goes back to many of our episodes, as you mentioned, that critical self-reflection piece on what are you thinking about? Where are you going? Where do you want to go? And if you're not sure, what are you doing about that to help understand better about yourself, where you want to go? So many people I talk with that are transitioning in their career one way or another into a new position, a lateral out of a company into a company, whatever, still don't understand what their direction or have a good solid idea of what their direction is. They know they want to get a job. They know that they're transitioning out of the military. They're transitioning into the military, into an environment, into another position, out of a position. but that's very short term. What is your direction? Where do you want to be in 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years? And to your point, what is your goal? What do you really want to do? Where do you want to be? What is your end state or your current desired end state until you reach that point? And then where do you go from there? And if you don't know, that's okay. It's very, very common. And, it can be frustrating, but if you sit down and think about it or go online, there's several tools that are out there that are available to you to understand what your interests are, what you're good at, maybe where the overlap is, hopefully that you'll find something different or unexpected that could help facilitate your understanding of what your direction is. And that can be, whether it's getting a job, whether it's education, training, just balancing your personal life with your professional life. That's still a challenge to some folks. So what is your direction is the big question we're going to be asking over and over, personally and professionally. Are you in a relationship, working or professional, that you do or do not want to be in? What are you doing to facilitate that direction? If everything is great, what are you doing to nurture those relationships? And if not, what can you be doing to nurture those relationships to help get yourself where you need to be? So I'm going to pause for a moment.
Yeah, you brought up a good point a little while back about maybe not knowing where that direction is. I mean, you mentioned 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, and that's okay to not know exactly where you're headed. But I think you also said something else that's very important is that goal setting. What is that final end state or your intended end state? And we've said it before, it could change 101 times before you finally get there. But I think the key thing is to having that destination in mind, that end state in mind, because even if you again can only picture or visualize 6 months, that's still a start. That's still better, and that more than likely can tie to that final end state. So having that final end state in mind, even if it's generalized, is a good idea, because that's going to help you to again get to that 3 month, 6 month, year, whatever it is. But it is the individuals, like you say, that don't have a clue, that they're just going to go day by day, get what they get, receive whatever other people dish out. That's what we're hoping, we can help you to not do. It's just that, wasting time, just not even considering what your future looks like. I mean, because you're going to get what you had the day before if you're not actively working on something, like you say. And whether personal or professional relationship, if you haven't defined some type of direction, then you are going to just be spinning your wheels. You're going to be going in circles. You're going to do the same thing over and over again until you put some intentionality into your decision to go one way or the other. Like I said, it could be going backwards, because you may realize you're going down a path and maybe back out and say, hey, wait, I don't like this direction. I'm going to go back a few steps, and then,
and a
veer
great
to the right
example of
or
that,
left.
Joe, is think about, for people that have started college or going to college or have completed college,
Absolutely.
or even a training program that has options, that you start going, or that they start going down one path or one degree or one program, only to realize, I don't want to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer.
Yep.
I want to be an artist or a musician or an actor, or vice versa. So there's or chef. I mean, that's popular. Cooking. I think that's good therapy, if nothing else, and it fills your belly. But
Right.
it's what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And if you don't know, again, we've said it a million times. Well, maybe not literally, but figuratively, that's okay.
Right.
It's okay to not know, but just don't stagnate. Just don't be adrift in the ocean and not having any direction in any paddle to lead you in a direction, and maybe you need to do a little research, go to the library, which is kind of an antiquated thing to say, but there are online libraries, surf the internet,
Right.
Find out what's out there, what resources are available to you, because there is a ton of resources, whether it's governmental, local government, whether it's specific entities or programs that are available to you to help you understand your career trajectory or relationship trajectory. There's all kinds of tools out there, and a lot of them are free, and some of them are paid, but there's tools out there. So
Right.
understanding your direction. One of the other things we like to talk about, you mentioned goal setting, but having a plan. What does
Right.
that goal and that plan look like? Maybe you are living day to day, and that's okay, week to week, month to month, but you have to think about what you're doing in that moment, and where do you see yourself in a week? Or maybe that is your pattern right now. You're just going week to week, trying to understand what that direction is, and if you're doing it with purpose and intentionality, that is a form of direction. To your
Right.
point, just waiting for life to happen or waiting for your career to happen, you may or may not like the results, and it's kind of a crapshoot, throwing those dice and hoping that you get the right answer. May as well, here, I'm going to make another very old reference, shake that magic 8 ball and see what comes up in the cube,
Right.
and that's pretty much where you're at. So you have to think about this and have some intention. And I dare to say sense of urgency, but a sense of urgency towards that direction, because you can't just be lackadaisical about it. If you want to be someplace or try to figure out where that place is, you got to have some direction and intention.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll go back to kind of the comments you made, previous, even like with the education piece. So, I many people know that if you listen to any of our episodes that I, went back to school back and forth 4 times before I
Mhm.
actually it stuck for me. But even in my doctoral program, I started down the path of, wanting to get my doctorate in IT,
Mhm.
IT management. And then, so I took several classes down that path, that coursework, and realized that really wasn't the direction I wanted to go. So I actually had to stop, pause, and then change directions.
Mhm.
And then I changed direction into organizational leadership because I realized that was a better fit for me.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was down a path. Even my undergrad and MBA are in IT, but I realized again that wasn't the path for me. So I
Mhm.
accumulated all these hours of working down that path or that coursework, and then at the end to switch. So it, like Dave said, yeah, we understand sometimes it may take you a bit to get to the final destination or to realize the direction that you chose may not be the right direction. But again, you've identified, hey, this is my end goal. And once I start to really look at that, then I realized, yeah, that doesn't really fit. But I
Mhm.
was actively, like we said it before, intentionally, you know, looking to get to a certain destination. And so I had that in mind. So that
Mhm.
helped me to again change directions, which is okay, which is acceptable. But like Dave said, it's when we don't do anything, when we just wait for, what's next. And I think one of our previous episodes was what is next. And you won't know what's next if you're just kind of sitting back
Right.
waiting for it to happen, hopefully, like you said, shaking that magic 8 ball to get where you want to go, and then surprised when you get someplace that you didn't want to go. So it's
Yeah.
still, even if you change directions multiple times, that's okay. It's just you're still in the driver's seat. You're still saying, okay, this doesn't align. I need to make a different, go down a different path, but you're still choosing that direction, which is still important.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think about when we talk about picking a direction or having your direction picked for you is
Yep.
going into the military. There's the
Right.
ASVAB skill test, and they're not there to make sure that you enjoy your job. They're trying to figure out or let you know what you're going to be good at
Right.
skill based wise.
Yep.
Enjoyment is not even in the top five. So, talk about having your career chosen for you and not being happy with it, or choosing a career or a company to get your in a position just to get your quote unquote air quotes for those of you who are listening, you know, foot in the door, doing
Right.
something you don't like. You have to be conscious and careful of that, and you have to have a deliberateness and you have to know that direction. You can't say, or you shouldn't say, I'm going to work for this company, but I'm going to do anything to get my foot in the door. The issue that arises then is you might be stuck in that position for
Yeah.
much longer than you'd ever anticipated, and it might actually derail the progress you would have had if you would have been just a little bit more patient or deliberate about some of your decision making.
Absolutely. That you're absolutely correct, Dave. I am definitely a person who's gone down that path. And you're right, it can derail the direction you're trying to go. So to Dave's point, it is very important that you really consider, if you're going to go down this path, to get yourself in the door, to really look at, it may not come in the time frame that you wanted. It may not even get you there. So you may end up having to shift gears again, go to another organization. So really, that is a very good point to keep that in mind as you choose to, just take this position or accept this position with your hopes. Because again, this is your clock. This is your journey. This is what you've decided for you. But that organization that you're working for is probably not going to be on the same page as you,
Right.
as far as getting you where you want to go or where you think you need to go. So really think about that, because that can cause a lot of conflict, internal conflict with yourself, whether to again start over, to change, do something different, because it will definitely affect you moving forward. And to Dave's point, it can derail where you're trying to go if you're not patient enough, if you're not going into it with that mindset that it may not happen tomorrow, might not even next year. So really think about that as you're considering what your next step is, what your next option is for employment or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be employment, but just the choices you make. Again, you have a path. Your path may not align with all those around you that you're
Right.
now maybe about to infuse yourself into, that
Right.
organization, that relationship, whatever it is. You have to know going into it, and if you can, put those clear intentions out there. If you're able to do that, in a lot of cases you're not, but if you're given that opportunity, then let someone know. And they may even tell you right at the very beginning, you know what, this is not going to work, or it's going to take you X amount of time to get there. So you may want to consider something else. So
Yeah, and you may encounter some very challenging decisions that you have to make, either
yep,
personally or professionally, because as much as we try to as much as we try to separate work from profession, a lot of times they do commingle, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective. But you may encounter some decisions. To your point, you may wind up having to leave part of your social bubble behind because they're not
right,
tracking with your direction, or maybe they're holding you back and not supporting you. Relationships on the personal side, it may be the same thing, or you may have to find a different geographic location for, that's a little bit more conducive to your family environment, or maybe a position that's more conducive to your personal environment. When I say family, that's whatever you do, however you define your family. It doesn't mean you have to be married or have kids. It just means your definition of family. So
right.
when you think about these things, really have some intention behind it, intentionality, if that's even a word. And we've said it a few times. I don't know, maybe we've just invented it, but you have to think about these things. Does your personal life support your professional life, and does your professional life support your personal life? A lot of times the answer is going to be no, but you have to do the best you can to find that balance, or what's going to work. It may not even be a balance. What's going to work for you and in that moment, or in that moment of time. And as I mentioned earlier, you may have to leave people behind, personally and professionally, to get to where you need to be for you. And as you mentioned earlier, Joe, in the very beginning, you might be stepping up, down, left, right,
Right.
sideways, backwards.
Yep.
You may have to do some things you don't like for a little while to get yourself back on track, back on that right direction, or the direction you want to be in, or the new direction you want to be on. So yeah, you think about these things. We say it all the time. critical self-reflection is a big piece of this, and understanding, who you are as a person and who you are as a professional is important. And sometimes the two go hand in hand. Maybe you love to cook and you're a chef. That's awesome. But what if that's not the case? What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it so that you're not just sitting there waiting for something to happen?
Right. I want to go back to something you mentioned, previously, just in your previous conversation, just about the idea that you might have to leave people behind to change directions, to change trajectories, and that's been a common question I've had in the past. Do you have to leave people behind, or do you have to change your friends and family? And sometimes that is the case. Not that you become bougie, or that
Right.
that you think you're better than anybody, but I think you said it before too. They may not be aligned with your final destination, or the direction you're trying to go. So rather than continue to fight through that, or to struggle through that, sometimes it is, you have to make that decision to
You have to understand what
move a
that walk
different
away
direction.
point is. And that's
Yes,
part of recalibrating your direction, or
absolutely,
recalibrating your compass, if you will. So if you
absolutely.
are heading in the right direction.
And I don't say that lightly, just to just drop all your friends and the family and things like that. No, I don't say that. That is a difficult thing to do. But you really have to take a strong, real hard look at where you are and where you'd like to go. And
Mhm.
does that mean, maybe not having the same type of relationships with people, not just to, again, turn them off and disconnect, but I mean, it just, you may not hang out with them anymore. You may not go to some of the same venues or things you did in the past. So that is a reality.
Mhm.
That sometimes that is what you have to do to go down the path that you want to go or need to go for, your happiness, for your goal achievement and things like that. So I just
Mhm.
want to touch on that, because that is reality. That sometimes that is the case, that you do um, sever some of those ties to a degree. Like I say, don't just
Yeah.
shut everybody off. Become in this in this household where you got your blinds closed and all that, but you may have to get to a point where you just won't have the same type of interaction with some people that
Yeah.
you have in the
And
past. So
sometimes those relationships just naturally fade away, if you will.
right,
Because, think about it, for those of you who've had, more than one job in your career, think about the people that you associate with on a regular basis, and then how many of them do you still associate with? And for
right,
military and veterans, that can be a big challenge, because that is a support system in and of itself.
absolutely,
And, in the workplace, the same is true. If you go from one organizational entity within a company to another, you're, the chances are you may not be as active or actively engaged with
right,
those other individuals. And instead of it being daily, it might be once or twice a year. Or if you switch companies, maybe the people that you thought were great friends and besties were at that time, but now you rarely or never talk to them. And
right,
it's not a good or bad thing. It's just an is what it is. And if you want to nurture those relationships, go after it. If not, then it is what it is. Because, like with anything, there's only so, well, from my perspective, there's so much capacity. And once it's full, you have to get rid of some things to make room for others.
right. Yeah,
Think of like a garage or a storage room or something like that. Once it's full, if you want to put more stuff in there, what are you taking out?
something's got to come out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good analogy to to help visualize what that means. And yeah, that's a very good example. Just a full garage. If you want to put more stuff in it, my wife actually mentioned that to me. I've got a couple of bikes now that I've been riding bikes the last few years, and anytime I mention I'm going to get another bike, she's like, "Well, which one are you going to get rid of?" It's replace, in, one out, one in. I mean, that's really where you get to, and even in your personal relationships and your even jobs, like Dave mentioned, you could change into another organization as part of the overarching organization, but you may now be in a different department. So now you got to meet new friends, new people that you're going to associate with. will you still have room for those people that were, close friends and like Dave said, besties, in that other part of the organization. So that's a very common thing to think about, that because you only have so much capacity. So you'll be busting out at the seams if you continue to try and put everything in there, hold everything. Eventually, something's going to give,
Yeah.
and so that's what you're trying to prevent, is that sense of, I got to keep everything or hold everything. But just some
Yeah.
things are going to have to go to the side for you to progress, for you to
Yeah.
move forward in that
And to
direction.
piggyback off what you said, this is a quality, not a quantity issue. You
Right.
can have a million Facebook friends, but what's the quality of those 1 million relationships? Are you actually talking directly, intentionally to each and every one of those 1 million people on a weekly or monthly basis? And I would challenge you that can be very, very uh time prohibitive, maybe, or bandwidth prohibitive. I mean, you have to do the math behind it to say, wow, I would have
Right.
to be up almost 24 hours a day to do that. The
Right.
same with your
Absolutely.
direction. I've talked to several people in their careers or personal relationships that are like, oh, well, I'm going in multiple directions at the same time. Well, that's great if you're going 5 different directions at the same time, but what's the quality of those directions? Are
Right.
you
Yep.
inching in each one? Or if you narrow your focus, narrow your direction to maybe 1 or 2 options, could you actually be going a lot further, a lot quicker, because your thought or direction or intentionality isn't so diversified?
Right. Absolutely. You're right. And I think we talked about this maybe offline, maybe not on the any episodes, but the idea that, we all think we can do so many different things at once, but you're right. What's the quality or the end result of all those things that you're trying to accomplish, versus being focused on, 1 or 2 things, and then the other things take, backseat, or they're lower priority. So that's also important, that, when you're thinking about that direction, um, does all that line up with the same direction, or are you just overextending yourself to where
Right.
you are trying to do so many different things that are taking you in so many different directions? So
Yeah.
getting that alignment together is very important.
Yeah, it really, really is, Joe. We can't, and that's why we dedicated an episode to direction. So, with that, we're going to wrap things up. What are your closing thoughts there, Dr. Joe?
As we mentioned from the very beginning, I mean, it's great to kind of know what you want to do when you grow up, so that you kind of can start to go down that path, set a direction, where you want to end up. Because we've said it, if you're not doing anything, if you're just sitting, hoping, waiting for something to happen, there's a very slim chance that it will. It's
Mhm.
you taking that action to go down a path, pick a direction. Again,
Right.
whether it's left, right, forward, back, but pick a direction, because I've said it at the very beginning. If you don't choose a direction, the direction is going to choose you, and you may not like the end results.
Yeah.
So I'll just caveat that with, kind of get an idea what your end state is, and that'll definitely help you start to pick a direction, whether it's personal or professional. But doing that critical self reflection, picking that end state or an idea of an end state, will help you with which direction you might need to go. So I'll
Yeah.
end it with that.
Joe, I couldn't have said it better myself, so I'm not going to. And with that, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. If you like this episode or enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, please like and share, get the word out there that we're doing this. We love to share our thoughts on this. We're not ones to hold it to ourselves. So with that, thank you again for joining us. And until next time, keep on being your not so ordinary you.